Blog Talk Radio.
Waarmee ons moet lewe, vergans en vermoord en verryp. Ek smoeg vir die bad news, vir Zuma en sy views, van ons op TV moet kyk. Ek wil nie meer hoor hoe ons tieners begrawe, oor niemand hul stuur aan die wet. Ek wil nie meer lees van affirmative action, of beklei om te hou wat ek het. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koos plessie en 'n tellery, wat lief kiesem en skryf en stry, oor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Ek siek vir Malema, sy leuns en sy sê maar, ons hou maar ons mond en betaal. Ons kruip weg in kampe, word blind vir die rampe, en bid dat die Heer ons omhaal. Daar's Winnie Mandela, wat mense verbrand het, maar nou wil sy huil in haar hand. Die staatskas is leeg en die ANC jeug saai verwoesting en pyn hier ons land. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koos plessie en 'n tellery, wat lief kiesem en om hier te kan bly.
You're listening to Radio Free South Africa with Corinne Smith on ResolutionRadio.com. Call in to listen now at 607-203-5423. That's 607-203-5423.
Welcome to Radio Free South Africa. This is your host, Karen Smith. Tonight we have Skalk van der Merwe as co-host, and we are interviewing Dennis Wise. Dennis Wise is the filmmaker who made that wonderful documentary, Adolf Hitler, The Greatest Story Never Told. And I'm hoping that you will walk away from tonight's episode with a little bit more information that history books, school teachers, the mainstream media continue to this day to misinform you about. And just maybe it'll make you feel a little better about being called a Nazi. With no further ado, welcome Skalk.
Thank you very much, Karen.
And welcome Dennis.
Hi, it's been a pleasure. It's been a long time. I've been looking forward to speaking to people in South Africa. I know the problems we've had over there, and I've covered one or two things in the documentaries myself. So, yeah, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I think we can draw some parallels between Nazi Germany and South Africa, but that is up to you two, because I have to honestly admit this is not a subject which I'm very well informed on. So Skalk is going to be the host tonight, and I will jump in if I have a question. So,
sure.
Gentlemen, please go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yes, Dennis. As I said before the show started, it's a tremendous honor for me and the privilege to speak to you. I enjoyed your work. I can't tell you to what extent. I sat through that movie, I think by now, maybe 20 times. And
thank you.
And before that, the first introduction that I made to, if I can call it, rebel historians about this was the work of David Irving, and especially Hitler's War, the monumental work, Hitler's War. that I think somewhere in the late 90s, and I realized, but there's somebody in Europe that actually woke up and understood what it was about. Now, of course, we know David Irving was then basically pushed to the side, and his whole career basically came to an end because of the whole thing. And he was slandered and brought before the press and before courts and what have you, for just simply speaking the truth. And it was one of those eureka moments for me, those dawning moments for me to realize, but if people go that far to stop the truth, there must be something very, very wrong. And because of that, I started to do my own research on the subject, and I started to find all kinds of contradictions. Now, the moment that you have contradictions, you have to find why there's contradictions, and sometimes contradictions lead you to then find that they are blatantly lies.
Sure.
So I have my own history and my own time that I've dealt with the issue of the Second World War, and there's a very specific reason why. In South Africa during that era, the 1930s and 40s, and even up to the 1950s, those people in South Africa, the nationalists in South Africa that brought freedom from the British Empire in South Africa, were actually nothing less than proxy national socialists. You had a guy by the name of Roby Leibrand, for instance. His organization was called the National Socialist Rebels. The Ossewa Brandwacht, the Oxwacken Centennial, which was a huge organization with about 300,000 members, were nothing more or nothing less than a Sturmabteilung, an SA. So there's very interesting parallels between what happened in the 30s and 40s in South Africa and what happened in and there was always this strange thing that I couldn't understand, that we fought the wrong side. I couldn't understand why South Africa, we sent the first and third divisions into the war in El Alamein, and we fought on Monty's side. I didn't understand why that was. And then later on, I realized, but it was all part of a much bigger conspiracy. It was part of a much bigger plan of fighting the actual good guys. Because in my view, and I'm saying this unreservedly, I believe that the world fought the wrong enemy. And it started to dawn on me at a very early age. And I can expand a little bit on it. When I really started to read into it and really started to inform myself, the people like Goering, the Luftwaffe head, and Friedrich von Manstein and Rommel and all those guys, all of a sudden they were not monsters anymore. They were just simply very loving Germans loving their country and doing their duty, and doing it magnificently against all odds. So it was in that context that I started to explore this whole issue. And then I came across, I think about a year and a half ago, I came across your work, and I was sitting there stunned. And you could actually see the visuals. You can see the movie clips and the visuals, and you can live yourself into that. And that was tremendously, it was a mind shift and a mind-changing experience, that also. Because for the first time, there's this, let's call it documentary movie, and it's simply speaking the truth. And when you speak the truth, all of a sudden, all of these things fall into place. So that was my introduction to you. If we can, because I'm very interested in this, how did it come about that you, Dennis, started this project, and why did you do this? What was the seed in your mind that caused this to sprout from?
Good question. Yeah. Okay. Well, I learned about World War II from a different perspective than other people in Britain, because my father had fought down in the Balkans, and on mainland Europe, they had a totally different look at World War II than what people outside Europe knew. Because the same happened in the Boer War. The control information by the British back to Europe and America was what it was, controlled. And so they never ever got a true picture of why World War II was taking place. And his perspective from what I had was I came home from school when I was 10 years of age, and I already spoke to my father about Adolf Hitler, but I knew also that his name was taboo, so I never pushed it. But when I came home, I said to my father, why did Adolf Hitler kill these 6 million Jews? And I'll never forget the look in his face. He was gutted. I could tell he was hurt. And he went on to explain in more detail. And so I knew from an early age what advantage this gave me was I could read the propaganda eventually when I got to, teenagers. I didn't want to sign up for the army because I knew what that army was. I knew it represented. The same with my boys as well. They never wanted to go to Iraq. They wanted to go to places in the Middle East because they knew the story because I passed it on to them. But that was as far as it went. It was only in-house because I knew this spell had been cast over the world, not just England, but England didn't even need Holocaust laws or any such laws. Indoctrination was so complete. But around the world, there was a spell. I'm convinced now there was a spell. And so, until I got the opportunity of the internet and saw the possibilities that I could reach a big audience, and then had a decision to make. Do I carry on as... I won't forget it. I mean, it was quite a number of years before, I got to that point. But the turning point really was after the war. I mean, you probably know this in your research. There are a lot of soldiers down in the Balkans knew what would happen to them if they surrendered to the communists. And so they moved heaven and earth to get to Austria, where they could then surrender to the British. And they took everybody with them. The grandfathers, the grandmothers, the grandchildren, the children, because they couldn't leave them behind. So all these, they called them camp followers. That was the name the British gave them. Anyway, they got to Austria, threw down the weapons, and surrendered. That's it. War's over for us. Hitler's died. We surrender. Because they were promised them. These were Croatian. Ustasha. Yeah.
Yes. Ustasha, yes.
Yeah. Well, they were promised then to be sticked or put on a train to Italy, where they will be safe from the partisans, where, without a doubt, just like the Bolsheviks, murderers and tortures and everything else. And I'm not saying that Ustasha were innocent, but you fight fire with fire, and obviously the communists had the upper hand. So, what my father told me was that he tricked him to put him on a train, and I found out previously to that the Cossacks who fought for Germany, they were told to get on a train, and they fought for 3 days. They thought, they knew where they were going. They were going back to Soviet Union, and they fought for 3 days, and the British battered them with baseball bats to force them onto the trains. So, in this case, they thought, well, we don't need this asshole, so we'll just blatantly lie. So they told the Ustasha and the commanders who had surrendered, you're going to Italy. Where the trains went were straight back to Yugoslavia. And I actually found interviews on the internet of British officers, you probably remember this in the documentary, admitting that they knew these people were all going back to a certain death. And when one of these officers phoned up command, do we send back the camp followers as well? I believe it was Churchill who go back with the answer, yes.
Yes, I want to emphasize that. So it's not only the combatants now under the Geneva Convention. These people already surrendered. So they are prisoners being POWs. So there's a certain amount of care that needs to be taken to them. But we're not only speaking of the combatants now being pushed into trains and sent back into the communist realms. We're speaking of the camp followers, women, children, elderly people. They are also being sent back.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Sorry that I interrupted. Please continue.
No, that's fine. So what happened is some, I believe, some actually committed suicide on the trains because, when there's clips of German soldiers who've been caught by the Bolsheviks in the documentary, and it shows their stomachs and testicles cut off. These are only young German soldiers. There's no Geneva Convention for the witness for the Bolsheviks. So it's the same with the partisans. So as soon as the trains landed, they're either shot, or they're tortured, or they're raped, and then they're taken on death marches. Certainly women and children. The old people probably didn't last that long. And when it comes to a decision, do I tell this side of the story what I believe is right, or do I just hide it? I couldn't bear the fact that I was facing one day maybe relatives I know who died on them trains because my family suffered as well. They really did. So there was no real decision. Not I have to do what I have to do. But the problem was I didn't know if I could do it because all I'd done up to that point were like some promotional videos and music videos and things. I never attempted a 6-hour documentary. And I gave it a go. And I knew at some point it would get banned off YouTube. But I managed to keep it on YouTube to about part 17. There's about 25, 26 parts. I can't remember the total now. Well, that's about part 17, which was enough then for other websites around the internet to pick up on it and run it on their websites as well. And it created just a sensation on the internet because this has never been done before.
Yes. It is groundbreaking. Mix up of
Groundbreaking, yeah.
It's indeed because we were 6 hours of visual telling the other side. Never mind, we don't even delve into which is now right or wrong. Just telling the other side. There must be millions of hours. Hollywood, documentary, propaganda, anything in that realm. There must be millions of hours telling one side of the story. And all of a sudden here pops out 6 hours of a Briton telling a different story and saying, but this is not how it happened. This is actually the truth. And that was the groundbreaking part for me also. Never mind Irving's work earlier on. That was I mean, it's a book. Yeah. And many people don't read books these days. They wouldn't know that. They wouldn't even know about it. But now you're sitting on a platform like YouTube, and anybody and everybody can actually go and watch it and simply have a look. And it's compelling and it's biting. It keeps your attention all the way through. So it was really a groundbreaking thing. So it's very interesting to me that it was actually through your father, through the what your father relayed to you that caused you to make the decision to go on ahead. And
and he was a wonderful man, by the way. He wasn't, I mean, your thoughts. People think of Nazis as neo-Nazis, and he was a gentle man. He really was, and he was loved by everybody, even in this country. But there was also a steel in him. I always saw he had a steel in him, and hopefully he passed that on to me as well. Yes.
And I suppose you received a huge amount of blowback because of what you did. I suppose that you're one of the main enemies on Earth today, if I could in that way. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's always interesting to me. Karen will know exactly what I'm speaking about. In South Africa, when you speak the truth, all of a sudden you become the bad guy, and you smeared and your character is climbed into and things like that. What happened to you after the work was released?
I knew the consequences if I did the documentary and then presented myself to the public. I actually knew. So I'd seen what happened to other people before. I followed people like Ernst Sundell, one or two others, and they'd been attacked and they'd been chastised and they'd lost their jobs and victimized. So I just decided I can tell this story to people anonymously, which will, protect me as far as one can be. And it's served me in good stead. It allowed me not only to do that documentary, but I did a second documentary, which was Communism by the Back Door, which everybody couldn't understand at first. When in Obama's rule, they moved in the border patrols 100 miles into the country, and they were stopping cars along the way, which is against the law in America. You've got a right to travel unimpeded. And one or two people were getting stopped, and I think it was Pastor Stevens who actually got tased with a taser. That was on YouTube, and there was girls getting tased, women. And so I wrote a comment under one of these videos, because what they were saying, the comments previous were all saying, oh, it's the Nazis, they're back again, and all this kind of carry on, which is a normal thing. But people were actually believing it. And then I just wrote, no, your problem in America at the moment is communism. These are not Nazis, these are Cheka or KGB. And I swear not, YouTube laughed when I mentioned it. They're not laughing today.
Yes, that's the thing, because there's a dawning moment for people that was raised, I would say, in the controlled environments that we raised, and then there's a dawning moment where they simply you can't close. I always say you open your head, and when that head is open, you can't close it again. And then initially it's scary for people. I think it's really scary to realize, but nothing around you is actually how it seems. Everything has been a narrative. Your whole life was a narrative. And I'm not speaking conspiracy theory here. I'm speaking simple facts of where you present facts to a person, not an opinion of another person, not something made in a Hollywood studio. A simple fact. And they simply with the mouth open that they can't take it further. It must be extremely scary for a person to be confronted with this the first time. But I agree with you. Then after a certain time, it starts to sink in, and then all of a sudden, those people that criticize you the most, many of them become your biggest advocates, because they've now also been enlightened and they know what's going on. Always differential.
Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the thing is, everything we've been told is a complete lie, and this isn't, as you say, conspiracy theory. When you watch that documentary, and another thing about the documentary, I can just say this, is that because I used Allied parts of Allied documentary, they were saying it themselves. And what they weren't saying, I was using text. And this text, what it did, it drew you into the film. It wasn't meant to, work out like that, but it actually drew you. You had to concentrate and read bits of text as well to keep in the film. So you couldn't go around the corner, buy a loaf of bread unless you stopped it, because you had to follow everything. But that many, you were living in that time. It was amazing, really, how it worked out. But all these people are talking. They're all Allied documentaries, about the Russian front and everything. So I'm not even attempting to make anything up. I just put the story together as I knew it. Found some decent footage with and a decent narrator talking with a type of music, I'm sure you'll agree, which was so befitting. That kind of music that I used, I've been making little videos with it previous to this, and they were fabulous music. And so I got a whole lot of music together, and worked it all out, auditioned each track, and then that's one of the biggest criticisms that I get told, or I get written about, saying that all that music is copyrighted and all this kind of carry on. And my answer to that is, if I am going to get a story out, which has faced, as you said, millions of pounds of propaganda from Hollywood, and I've got a little DVD here, which in essence truly believe that this documentary broke that spell.
Yes.
People have been stunned. They haven't slept for 2 weeks. They haven't eaten because it's ticking over in the mind what they've seen. They know it's true. They might be denying it because obviously there have been other factors that have taught them differently. But you know the truth when you see it. And the thing I say at the end of this documentary is that I don't care if you go and research it. I encourage go research what I just said. And on IMDb, sorry, go on.
Dennis, I want to highlight two things here.
Sure.
The first thing, and you said it, I wanted to come to that in a moment, but you said it already now. I come from a legal background, and when I was taught how to litigate, I was taught by my mentors that you always use what is in their case. You take their words and their affidavits and what they say, and you prove your case with it, because if it was what they said, they can't deny it anymore. And you did exactly the same. You took a huge amount of allied, for instance, things written by the Allies and or footage shot by the Allies. It's their footage, so they can't deny it. It's there. It's not something that a German propagandist under Goebbels was maybe writing. It was something that was coming from most of it.
I'll give you a prime example.
Yes.
A prime example is that they'll go on YouTube. I've got a video up there which shows the camps, the Eisenhower camps, where they received no food, no water, no shelter. They were put in a feed, die. Okay? And people come on and say, that's not true, that's not true. Okay, if it's not true, why, as Bush did in his era, why did it change the Geneva Conventions, the rights of the Germans, into from POW to unarmed combatant prisoners, which takes all the rights away from all the Germans, as it did from the Afghans, right? They could put them wherever they wanted, treat them wherever they wanted, because they've no rights. Why would they do something like that? It wasn't just a few. It was all the German army. They were now without rights, and they were trapped without rights. So when the tragedy didn't happen, well, the wheels are in motion. I say to you, why did they then take the rights away? Took the rights away because by doing that, they didn't have to allow the Red Cross. They told people whoever goes to help these soldiers at a fence will be shot. And they were. And so the soldiers died the most horrible death. Amazing.
Yes, those I would call them dedicated death camps after the war. That most people are not even they wouldn't even know about it.
Yeah. Many more died after the war. The jury.
Yes, many of the soldiers, the German soldiers, never mind on the Eastern Front, the guys going to that were captured by the Russians. We will get to them in a moment, but in the Allied hands, the supposed safe Allied hands, what's the numbers? How many of those POWs died? It's 15. I think there were 15 million civilians died after the war. Just to be uprooted from your house for 5 minutes, and your house is taken over, and you're left on the street, and all you've got to do then is your road to Berlin, which is already destroyed. There's nowhere to go for these people. And they were chucked out of their houses, and they starved to death. That's just the civilians. The soldiers in the camps were imprisoned. In the prisons, the Jews took over Germany again once the war had been won. Rothschilds replaced everybody, just like Hitler replaced everybody of the Rothschilds. So it's vice versa back again. And the Germans now are going to pay because this is the second time they've tried to overthrow this satanic empire. And now they are going to pay, and they did. They paid after World War I. People don't realise that one. A million were starved after World War I just to sign this Versailles Treaty. But Germany has to sign it, otherwise they're all starved. Dennis, what's always the narrative that was always built is the Germans were this belligerent nation there in Central Europe, and they wanted to conquer everything and destroy the whole of Europe, etc., etc. That's the narrative, but that's also not the truth. The start of the Second World War, in your opinion, was that an act of aggression by the Germans, or what happened there? Was it in self-defense? What was going on there?
I cover this in the third documentary. Like I said, I mean, the total about 18 hours, these three documentaries altogether, right? And the third one is the secret Masonic victory of World War II. Because I picked up enough information here, there, and everywhere. I started to realise what World War II was all about. And what it boils down to, there's so many lies and misinformation flying around. It was basically a holy war. The Germans, or Hitler, was fighting to save a Christian culture and Europe from the Bolsheviks. This was the danger. And people talk about this positive Christianity. Positive Christianity wasn't a German idea, although they picked it up and they were going to go through with it if they won the war. What positive Christianity was before World War II, after World War I, the fear of the Bolsheviks coming through into Europe was terrifying, because they knew what the Bolsheviks were like, and so they made a compact set of nations across Europe which would defend Europe from the Bolsheviks if they attacked. This was called I think it was anti-marine. I found out all this in the third documentary, and so they were all signed up to fight all together if the communists invaded. They didn't as such, but World War II, what Hitler was doing, Hitler was trying to kill the Versailles Treaty, and he was doing a good job, because nobody lost any lives.
She's back, and this time failed Democrat.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah.
Karen, is it you speaking?
No, it was some interruption. I don't know what it was.
It's not interrupted. No, that's fine. Thank you, Dennis. The same. Thank you. Yes.
Well, yeah. No. Well, what I'm saying was, he was trying to break the Versailles Treaty, because the Versailles Treaty was strangling Germany. It was meant to kill Germany. They cut up parts of the country. Germans would have been lost to their homeland. They would have been sucked into these other countries, lost all their identity, and then Hitler was going about it to bring it all back. Up to Poland, he succeeded. Austria was the invasion. I showed in The Greatest Story Never Told, they actually called that the War of the Flowers, which I'd never heard before. I knew the Anschluss wasn't an invasion, which we were told. Excuse me. And I found footage to prove it. And the 99.7% of the yes vote in Austria is the answer to a GCE question for students. That is the correct answer. Everybody voted to join the Reich. So that's proven. So at the end of the day, he joined up with the Reich. But when he went to get negotiations with Poland, what happened with Poland was, and this is a fact now, the last episode I did on the Freemason one, I discovered in the White Book, each country has a coloured book, right? And Germans were a white book, and the British who invented this, right, had a blue book, and France had a green book, etc. And what this does is you write down the minutes, the conversations prior to a war breaking out. And the Germans, as meticulous as ever, wrote down all the conversations with the negotiations with the Poles and everybody else. And the British were supposed to do the same. Well, consequently, what I discovered was the German White Book was over 400 pages. The British Blue Book was actually just over 100 pages. And they told the US to ban the German book so the Americans couldn't read it. And in this, do you understand what I'm saying? And in this book, it goes on to say that the British didn't start their book till 6 months after the refugees had gone to the border because of the pogroms. The German refugees were in the houses burned, there were murders, there were killings, and they were drove to the Polish border with Germany. And Hitler was trying to negotiate, and this is in March. By July, I think Poland, the army had already, they got ready for war. I forgot what the word you used there, but and then come September the 1st, it had been at least a good 6 months when Germany had tried to negotiate. It's all written in this white book. Even Hitler had offered so magnanimous an offer. Even the German negotiators were shocked because Hitler wanted to dissolve it. But because what I believed at the time was France and Britain behind Poland saying, look, if Germany attacks, don't worry, we're going to back you. When I found out who the real person was Roosevelt. It was Roosevelt who urged France and urged Britain to back Poland, and don't worry, because America will be in the war to join you at some stage. And he even told that to the Czech president who was out of the country at the time because the Germans had thrown him out at Venice. And Roosevelt explained it to Benez as well. So there's documentation of all this, and at the end of the day, when the Germans finally invaded, they found the bodies of all these German minorities, and the big thing was, they always used to say, oh, these murders happened after Germany invaded. What they never said was that the bodies were that decomposed. Germany took a couple of weeks to win that war. But the bodies were that decomposed, it must have been months before that these Germans were murdered, and brutally murdered. And so,
yes, and why would the Germans then murder, genocide the Germans? It simply doesn't make sense. These contradictions.
Well, they wasn't saying that. What they were saying is when the Germans invaded, the Poles then got so annoyed that that's when the murders of the Germans started.
I understand.
That's always been the get out. But the bodies proved in the White Book, special teams of medical experts went in, and you can see by the photographs, these weren't just dead a week or two.
But then it's still, never mind if the narrative is that the Poles now, for some reason, started to kill the minority Germans in Poland upon German attacking. That is still a war crime. You're not supposed to civilians because you're attacked. But just to sum up what you were saying, and it answers my question totally. The narrative that's always been built was that Hitler was simply trying to get more and more and more land mass back into the German Reich, and that forced him to pick a fight first with Czechoslovakia and the Anschluss with Austria, but Austria was a German country anyway, and then he fixed his sights on Poland because he wanted to take over the whole of Poland. But that's simply not the truth. Because in Poland itself was a substantial minority of Volksdeutsche, ethnic Germans. They were sitting there, and they were sitting in that area that was given to Poland after the First World War. It was the corridor up to the Baltic Sea. Many were sitting. Many areas into deep Poland itself. It's the old Teutonic Knights. It was even from the time of Teutonic Knights that the Germans settled in those areas. And
can I just say, for people listening who don't quite understand, the agreement of the forced agreement of the Versailles Treaty was such that Danzig, a German city, 98% German, was in the middle of Poland. And so country, and yet the Poles told the teachers, this is all over Poland, not just Danzig, told the teachers, if you don't learn Polish within 3 months, right, we're sending you back to Germany. And they did. They sent them back to Germany, brought Polish teachers in, and started teaching the Germans as they were Poles.
Exactly. Yes, that's an avid example of once again, now we're back in 1918 with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. It brings an end to the First World War, but it also creates states. And one of the states, nation states that's created is Poland. And Poland is made up of parts of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, parts of Germany, and if I remember correctly, parts of the old Russian Empire. So it's a nation all of a sudden. In 1918, all of a sudden, I think by 1921, all of a sudden a new nation was created there, smack in the middle of Europe. And for instance, the old harbor town of Danzig on the Baltic Sea, it was always a German city. It was always. And now, all of a sudden, you're quite right, it's right smack in the middle of Poland. It was Volksdeutsche, the ethnic Germans, that were standing there in the firing line. And the rights. It was a matter of time before they would have been genocided in any event. And that is what prompted him. You're quite right also about the time of negotiation. There was about 6 to 7 months where there were intense negotiations. But let's deal with the issue of what do we do with the ethnic Germans in Poland. So it wasn't this belligerent Germany now trying everything in its power to create a war and therefore take over Poland, and that's one of the big narratives, because it's very easy in the Western civilization. There's always a good guy and the bad guy, and the good guy is usually the guy defending. Batman is always defending against the bad guys, and Superman is always defending against the bad guys. So it's very easy to paint the narrative of Germany being the aggressor and the West being the defenders. But it's exactly the opposite what happened here. So it's very interesting that already there the whole narrative is skewed.
Well, can I just say, just briefly for your listeners again, so they can get an understanding of this. Obviously, World War II stems from World War I, and in World War I, the Versailles meeting, the peace treaty so-called, was a Masonic celebration. Rothschilds hosted that particular event. There was 120 Jews arrived. People say with the leaders of these countries, what there actually were the minions of the Jews. You know, the prime ministers to the presidents, these were all puppets of the Jews. So 120 Jews turned up there. The Pope was banned, and the law was sent down, like I said, because of the starvation, Germany had to sign. Okay, well, if you go back a little bit after that, the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution, right, was funded by the US bankers. And I didn't realize this for a long time. But what that actually means, is that Lenin is not in charge, and Stalin is not in charge. These are just managers. The people in charge are the US bankers and via London. Okay? But nobody knows about this because it's covert. So all this time, all these revolutions like the Spanish and the Mexican, the US are funding, but it's going through the Soviet Union. And I've found proof of that in the Spanish Revolution. There's documents which shows it's British money and American money going to the Soviet Union, then into Spain to fool people. And of course, the war after the Spanish Revolution was won by Spain, by Franco, with the help of Mussolini and Hitler. It wasn't long after when the big war started. So that's just the bit of a ground thing. So every decision, what people know of the Bolsheviks, they couldn't do without the boss telling them. The boss was the US.
I want to stop you with the greatest respect there for a moment, Dennis, because we're coming up to midway to the show.
Sure.
But now, and this is now for the South African listeners, and it's for the listeners worldwide. It's exactly what you are saying is playing off today again. In South Africa, we see exactly what you are saying. that it's the Rothschilds and the Soroses of this world coming into South Africa, and they've always been active in South Africa.
Yes.
The Ramaphosa, our current President Ramaphosa, and the previous one, and all of them before, are just managers. It's not, the real power does not lie with a man in South Africa by the name of Cyril Ramaphosa. He's just a pawn, he's just a puppet on a string. Do you agree when I say this?
Yes, 100%. 100%.
Yes, and it's a very clever way of doing the dirty work. You will never find the hand that, or the instigator.
That's the essence of democracy, because you never see the real power. The politicians come and go, left and right, but the agenda stays the same.
Exactly. The agenda stays the same, and therefore you could have a nationalist party, a so-called nationalist party in South Africa, because since the mid-70s it wasn't nationalist any longer, and that evolved into the so-called new national party. You don't know maybe the South African history, and the nationalist party of those days in the end amalgamated into the African National Congress, which is a black party. But the parties, the agenda stays the same. We have controlled opposition on this side, being the Democratic Alliance, the DA, which by its very nature is a leftist party. So you have a communist government being opposed by a communist opposition. Now, I mean, in no way on earth can that be logical. You must have opposing forces opposing one another.
People can't get the head around it. Margaret Thatcher, for instance, everyone looked at her as right wing, and she used to go to Europe, and she used to argue, and she used to come back saying, I've got a better deal, all this kind of carry on. She was an internationalist. She sold every asset off. Britain never has. And at a funeral, she was given this lavish funeral by the elite because she'd done her job. And she was party to Mandela and the party, being overturned as not tourists. The ANC.
Yes.
And Reagan was another.
And you see today that they've these magnificent state-owned enterprises that was built during the era of the old nationalist party. So the ESCOM, the Sasols, those they were at that time they were world-class leading institutions and industries. They have been run into the ground by the ANC government, and they are now at the point of selling them off for cheap to the highest bidder. And we know who the highest bidder is. He's going to buy
based on the power.
Yes. Yeah. It's a simple game of it's a simple game of causing revolution, having a country to fold. Venezuela. There's a reason why Venezuela specifically is a country folding, because they have oil. It goes without the oil. It's nothing more, nothing less. So it's very strange how these things work, and it's illuminating to me that we have this historic trend. Yes, Skalk van der Merwe is sitting speaking the first time with a man called Dennis Wise. It's the first time, the second time, but the first time we have an actual conversation with one another, and we're saying exactly the same.
Yes.
And we started the conversation to say, we are only here to tell the truth. Now, if anybody can tell us another truth, then I will budge and say, I made a mistake. But I challenge people. Come and tell Dennis Wise that he is not being truthful. You can say a lot of things, but you can't say that he's not truthful. And come and tell Skalk van der Merwe, you're not being truthful. And that's the key to this whole thing. Corinne, I don't know, how much time do we have? Maybe we should go for a break now.
Okay, we'll just take the ad break right now, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Thank you, my dear.
Hold those thoughts, gentlemen. We will be back.
By now you know that wireless technology like cell phones do in fact pose dangers to the health and privacy of everyone. Block-It Pocket's wide range of products are unmatched in providing the protection you deserve. No scare tactics, just common sense. BlockItPocket.com offers quality American-made options to alleviate and eliminate these invisible dangers. Learn more at BlockItPocket.com or call 888-315-9618. BlockItPocket.com, enhancing health and privacy.
Are you a native son or daughter of the South who bleeds the stars and bars? Someone not born in Dixieland, but who is a Johnny Reb at heart and looking for a place to shop that promotes Southern heritage? Well, your search is over. Dixie Republic is the place to go for all things celebrating the Confederacy and promoting Southern pride. Inside the log cabin, just outside Travelers Rest, South Carolina, Dixie Republic has t-shirts, hats, videos, flags, books, belt buckles, and some of the best mouth-watering barbecue sauce that will ever touch your lips. There's just about everything you want honoring the South at Dixie Republic. Well, you say that South Carolina's a bit too far for you to drive? Have no fear, my friend. All of this is just a mouse click away. Go online at www.dixierepublic.com, your home for all things celebrating the Confederacy and promoting Southern pride.
Are you worried about America? Do you fear the power of the Obama brigades to take away your rights? The Obama presidency is the most radical left-wing administration in American history. Our constitutional liberties are in danger. What can you do? Join the Council of Conservative Citizens. For over 20 years, the CFCC has fought for the rights and ideals of the European American majority. The CFCC has won legal and political battles to protect your heritage and your liberties. The CFCC advocates strong state governments over the power of Washington, D.C. to rule your life. The CFCC believes in an American-first foreign and domestic policy which opposes globalism and one-world government. The CFCC advocates racial integrity as God's natural order. Visit our website today at www.cfcc.org and join fellow European Americans in the fight for our people.
Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character, where educating both hearts and minds brings about academic excellence. There is a school in American Fork where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. Based on LDS principles and a love of country, now in our 39th year, American Heritage School is accepting fall enrollment for kindergarten through high school. What would you do for your child? Give them an education that will prepare them for life. Located east of the Temple in American Fork, American Heritage School is a remarkable and affordable alternative. Visit us, find us online, or in the Yellow Pages. American Heritage School in American Fork.
Restore the Republic, the social network for the modern revolutionary, activating the silent masses into action. At restoretherepublic.net, we're seizing power from the globalist world controllers and handing it back to the people. Restoretherepublic.net, where patriots rally on the objective. The Liberty Bell tolls once again for a movement on the rise. Make restoretherepublic.net your place to unify and activate the revolution.
You're listening to Radio Free South Africa with Corinne Smith on ResolutionRadio.com. Call in or listen now at 607-203-5423. That's 607-203-5423.
Welcome back to Radio Free South Africa. This is your host, Karen Smith. Your actual host tonight is Skalk van der Merwe, and our guest is Dennis Wise, and we are discussing Adolf Hitler, the greatest story never told. Over to you, Skalk.
Thank you very much, Karen. Dennis, once again, thank you very much for the privilege. If we can move a little bit to something that has been making a little bit of it, or a few headlines the past year, and that relates to the firebombing and the terror bombing and the killing of the German cities, Dresden, Hamburg, many of the cities in the Ruhr Valley, and so forth during the Second World War. It was always narrated that this was an act of defense. They would fly over the Reich with fleets of bombers, and they would bomb out the factories that built the war machines and the tanks and the ball bearings and all these things. But that's also not the truth. It was a terror war against the civilians of Germany. That's my opinion. Do you agree with me, or do you disagree?
Well, basically what it is it's continuing today, not just with the Germans, but even the white races were victorious in World War II. You look at America, there's an influx of immigration. There's Europe. You've seen the mass immigration in Europe. And obviously, you've got your own problems down there with power being switched over to the coloureds in South Africa. All this stems from, believe it or not, the evidence is irrefutable, is the signing of the Concordat, which Hitler signed with the Pope and the Vatican, which is brought over and not understood by a lot of people, but not only with Germany, but with Spain, although Spain they could only send volunteers in World War II after their Civil War. But Spain signed it, Belgium signed it, a host of other countries in Europe signed a Concordat with the Vatican, because what Hitler was eventually aiming to do was to reinstate the Holy Roman Empire. And I found 100 notes and just one. I mean, I was pushing and pushing. I knew I was getting close, and then suddenly there was just a flood of the doors opened, and I could see exactly he'd gone to Austria to reclaim the jewels which had been taken from Nuremberg. Nuremberg, by the way, is the unofficial city, the most holiest city in Germany of the Holy Roman Empire. It was the unofficial capital. It brought. Yes.
No, it's on the Charlemagne. It was the capital.
That's right. Always a German emperor. Right. So he brought these jewels back from Austria, put them in Nuremberg. He brought the cloak that Jesus wore before he was crucified, so millions around Europe could go on a pilgrimage to Nuremberg or Trieste was the city. Over 2 million visited that. This is a Christian country, okay? And a lot of people say, talk about paganism and that. No, what happened after World War I, Roosevelt in 1933 gave his New World Order speech, and in that he put the pyramid on the back of the dollar. That was a signal to the people in the know around the world that the American government had successfully infiltrated and on their work to destroy itself. And not only that, but the Catholic Church is now dead.
Yes.
Well, Hitler came to power. Yeah, this is all in this last documentary. It's all sourced. But Hitler came to power, immediately come to power, the Vatican closed the Centre Party, which was the Catholic Party in Germany. They closed that down, yes, and brought him to power. Yeah, if you investigate this, that brought him to power. They sent millions of Catholics into the National Socialist Party because they felt that the Weimar government, a lot of priests, a lot in that party had gone liberal, and the Vatican, especially the Jesuits, hated this liberalism, and so Hitler. Many people say that he persecuted the Catholic Church. No, he didn't. What he did, he warned all priests and bishops, and they had to sign this deal to say that they wouldn't speak against the government. If they spoke anything apart from religion, if they spoke against the government, they would be arrested. And what he arrested was the liberal priests, with the blessing, believe it or not, of Pope Pius back in the Vatican. So not only did he do this, but then he destroyed Freemasonry. Because what you've got, and this goes back to the British Empire. I'm sure the Boer War, you'll get, the camps that they made there for the Boer women. A lot died down there. Freemasonry, right, was the machine in the West. Churchill was a Freemason. Roosevelt was a Freemason. They were all Freemasons, right? Stalin was a Freemason. People say he weren't Freemason. Trust me, he doesn't sit down and talk secret war plans with two of the Masons if he's not a Mason. Do you get the point?
Yes, I fully agree with you. I fully agree. Yeah. And just a footnote to that. Sure. If you see the rise of Stalin versus, for instance, Trotsky, and the whole the East-West thing, man. And after the war, Churchill comes and says, well, now there's iron curtain, but they are trading up and down and left, right, and centre. So where's the iron curtain really? So yes, I can fully appreciate when you say you're part of masonry. Yes.
Where this immigration stems from is in 1920, Count Kuhnhoff-Kalergi wrote the book Practical Idealism, which has been never been translated. It was Austrian, never translated into English. But the bits, what I translated, what people know of, is that he comes up with the idea of mixing Europe. He wants one mixture of a race called coffee-coloured with just enough intelligence to get to work and to come back to work again. Go on and come back to work again. That was his plan.
Dennis, would you regard that as a slave plantation where you have a population so mixed and so grey and so powerless that it's simply basically what you're saying there? Yes. Thank you. Continue, because there's a footnote to that also, and I will get to that. Karen, I think you know what I'm speaking about now.
I know exactly what you're thinking about.
What people don't realise, right, is after World War I, the race mixing started. Because I found evidence then in the Rhine Valley, the French sent 40,000 black colonial soldiers into the Rhine Valley who had been fighting the German men only 2 years before. They are now armed to the teeth. The Germans, the Weimar government, has took the guns off them, and the women now pray for these colonial soldiers. And I've got documentation again. Even England at the time, when they found out, people in England were horrified at what was going on in the Rhine Valley. It was hell on earth for the Germans. So this race mixing step, then Kuhnhoff-Kalergi escaped Hitler a few times. He escaped Austria, he escaped France, went to America, sold his story to Truman. Then Truman liked it, a Freemason again. Yes, we'll implement this policy for the United States. That's why all the immigration was opened up after World War II. So all this stems, and Hitler and Germany knew all this, and other European countries knew all this, and this is what they were fighting for. And I don't know whether, when you watch The Great Story Never Told, if you cried or not, but I know plenty of people who cried when they realised just what we'd lost in that war. And I cried myself when I realised.
You lost and we lost civilization, not Western civilization. We lost civilization. Bolshevism for the guys that's not politically inclined. It's a faction of communism. It was the faction
it's satanic.
It was the faction that became predominant under Stalin. Trotsky was in another faction, and Lenin had a little bit of another idea. But Bolshevism, it's the most satanic, it's the most evil and pure form of communism that you can have. And in all Hitler's writing, everywhere I read Hitler, he's always fighting, he's always writing against Bolshevism. To say that Bolshevism will come into Europe and it will destroy not Germany, not Germans, it will destroy civilization.
Yes.
And it's exactly what's happening in South Africa today. Then a civilization is being destroyed. Our schools, universities, our buildings, our government, everything. Civilization that has been built over 350 years has been destroyed and is being destroyed in the last couple of years, the last 25 years. So it's a literal destruction of civilization. When you go back to the First Reich, you were speaking of the Holy Roman Empire. That was the first.
Yes, the First Reich.
The Second Reich was the Reich of Bismarck, and the Third Reich was the Reich of Adolf Hitler.
That's right.
All three the Reichs was there to preserve. Those empires were there to preserve civilization, the Greek civilization, the Roman civilization, even the Islamic civilization. It was there to build and bolster, and it was during those times that Europe became the most predominant power on earth. The great cathedrals, the castles, everything that we know as civilization today evolved under the first, the second, and the Third Reich. Let's be honest about it. So if you destroy that, you literally cut off the head of civilization across the world. The only people that has not been affected to a very large extent to that is in the Far East. It's China, but we will get to that in a moment, and Japan.
Sure.
But Japan was also of course, there was a war between Japan and America, and it's always, once again, that the Japanese are portrayed as the aggressors. They fly over Pearl Harbor and they bomb a few ships, and all of a sudden they are the belligerents. But if you know the story behind the story, you understand why the Japanese did something so stupid. It was in self-defense, because it was only that would have taken. They were based in the Philippines. The Americans were based in the Philippines, and it was only a matter of time before they would have taken over the Far East in any event. So it was not Japan being belligerent. It was just Japan defending Asian civilization.
Yes. And they wanted to be a sovereign country, as did Germany and other countries in Europe, where this satanic empire wanted all countries to be open borders, like we are today. So the proof in the pudding, you can see how Christianity has died more or less now in Europe. Trump, I believe, is going to bring in the no-hide laws. I covered that in one of the documentaries where if you're anti-Semitic or you criticise Israel, or even if you have a rosary and pray with a rosary, it's the death sentence. This is what happened in Russia with Stalin. He brought the same law in, the same laws, and Trump is on about it now. A lot of stuff there. So that's a terrible way if that happens. But if I can just go back to this, after this race mixing in the 1920s, Hitler comes to power, kicks out all the bankers. Don't believe this Rothschild. He was funded by the Rothschilds rubbish. Hitler was funded by the Vatican, and Tyson, a billionaire, and Ford, another billionaire, and other industrialists. He didn't need the bankers, US bankers, to fund him. So he kicks them all out, and then the world jury then has a meeting. They have a meeting, I think in Switzerland. They come to a decision, what are we going to do about Germany? Because now we've lost a lot of income, and they're going to lose a lot more income as these years go on, because Europe's going to go, and Russia's nearly going to fall. So the Jews are panicking. So they went back, and they said to the German people, this is all documented, you reinstate every communist and every Jew and get rid of Adolf Hitler. And when Germany refused to stand on Ultimayer, went back to America. He was one of the leading Jews. He went back to America, went on the radio and announced a holy war on Germany, which was never revoked. They had this all goods now, banned for all these goods. Sorry?
It was written down. I've seen actual media reports. I think it was in the New York Times, and I saw another newspaper where it actually said Palestine has now declared a holy war against Germany. It's what's it. The implication being the Jewish world as declared. So yes.
Judea. War.
Yeah.
And the Jews are from Judea anyway, I don't think.
My mistake.
Yeah, but like I said, this was never revoked. So this holy war was always there. Now, Benjamin Friedman, who used to be a Jew, was a high-up Jew, went to Versailles Treaty, became a whistleblower. He said he lived in Germany at that time, and the Germans knew. There's going to be, at some point, Europe's either going to be Christian, or it's going to be communist Jewish. They knew that at one point. War was going to break out. There's plenty of quotes on the internet you can see from leading Jews saying Hitler doesn't want war, but he's going to get war. And this is what all that was. It was a build-up. And Roosevelt, you would not believe how hard he was trying to get into the war, even though they were supposed to be neutral and had promised not to take his boys into a war over in Europe. I've got a whole list of newspaper headlines over a period of time. What he was trying to do to get in that war and coax Germany to fire on an American ship. Incredible.
Yes. Hello, Dennis?
Yeah.
Oh, you're there? Oh.
Yeah. No, I thought I'd better let you have a say now.
That's fine. but I want you to narrate to us your findings and your what you found about the terror bombings of Germany. And specifically, there's a reason I want you to explain to the listener what happened there, because once again, I just want to explain, we've always had this narrative of the brave American and the British airmen going into battle and flying over Germany and bombing the armaments factories to stop Germany from fighting. But that was never what they were doing. They were genociding. Through bombing, they were genociding the cities of Germany during those bombing runs. Can you explain to us what happened there?
Yeah, well, it's a policy instigated by Churchill and the RAF, who, in their opinion, felt it legally correct to bomb civilians, and so targeted heavy working class areas which were entirely knitted in Germany, and proceeded to kill civilians. And Hitler waited for 3 months, and he said in a speech, this madness has got to stop. This isn't right. These civilians have a right in war. But although at that time America wasn't doing the same, Britain continued to bomb civilians. So after 3 months, Hitler said, "We've got to get back." And so, although they didn't do half as, not even a tenth of what the British did, some bombs dropped over London and people were killed.
Yeah, Coventry, the famous incident of the bombs on but it's one incident. And what you were saying, there was an absolute moratorium on the Luftwaffe bombing any civilian areas. And it was in response to the RAF bombing.
3 months,
That was at the start of the war, 1939-1940. Thank you, Dennis. Just continue from there on.
Yeah, well, what that did for Churchill then was Churchill could then turn around to people who did not know what was going on over in Germany. He said, look at these evil Germans are bombing civilians. So that kept the war going. That kept people were not against this war now. They thought the Germans were the bad guys. This is all this propaganda, and they've got proof. So it got to the point where America decided then to change the policy, and I think it was the Americans bombed civilians during the day, and then the British would bomb them at night, constantly, 24 hours. And what they didn't just bomb them, they built certain devices, incendiary devices, which would cause the heat and the fire backlash. And so a firestorm would be created purposely. This was purposely done. Another excuse of Churchill's was, they'll get rid of Hitler. If we keep doing this to him, they will have a revolution and get rid of him. Never happened. Never once was an uprising, because the Germans knew Hitler had educated people when he came to power. It showed them Masonic displays, Freemason displays, when he closed all the lodges. He showed, told them about the Bolsheviks, what would happen if they came. And people might say it was propaganda. That was the greatest rape, biggest rape in history. 2 million women in Germany. Don't forget the Hungarians, the Romanians, and even people in Auschwitz were raped, which people don't know about.
I want to come to the rape separately, because that was exactly the second part that I wanted to explain. But I just wanted to explain to the listener the mechanism of bombing. What actually transpired there? They would basically go in huge fleets and squadrons of bombers, those protected by fighter planes, and they would fly over Germany, and then over very densely populated areas, the Ruhr Valley, the Rhine Valley, Hamburg, Berlin. They would fly over those cities, and they would drop a mixture of bombs, some of them being high explosive, but many of those bombs being incendiary bombs. Now, it doesn't explode anything. It just causes a fire, a brandbom. In Afrikaans, we call it a brandbom. It's a burning bomb. So you throw it on a house and you cause a fire. So they would carpet bomb. They would carpet bomb whole areas with incendiary bombs and create firestorms. Now, what is a firestorm? Germany was still, many parts of Germany was still very old, so many of those buildings were built of wood. So we started to bomb that. And you would cause a firestorm where you bomb a huge area, and there's so much fire that the fire started to feed itself, and it would blow up.
That's right. You couldn't breathe. Yeah.
And the fire just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they would bomb the outlying areas. They would bomb with high explosives to basically chase the people towards the flames. So that in one night, I don't know if the statistic is right, but in one night in Hamburg, they killed more than 40,000 people that we know of. One night, 40,000 people. Now, if that is not genocide, nothing is. They did exactly the same over in Japan, and a large part of Japan is built of wood and paper. At that stage, anyway, it's still the traditional housing of Japanese people. So they would fly over Tokyo and they would incendiary bomb districts of Tokyo, and they would simply burn the people to death. 100,000 people a night. Now, if that is not genocide, what is genocide? So yes, and then of course you already touched on it. There was a systematic rape of women across Europe, and it was not only done by the Red Army; it was also done by the Allies. Expound on that for me, please. What was going on? Why were they raping the whole of Europe? Literally raping every woman they could. What was going on?
Well, the reason, as we talked about before, was they wanted to kill the race, right? Like Kunov, Kalergi, and all these Africans there were going into Europe. Eventually, that will kill that white race, that Germanic gene, and so the invasion. The first wave of Russians were white Russians, but the second wave were the agents from back in the Far East, and just, I mean, Thomas Goodrich wrote the book Hellstorm, and goes into great detail of what exactly happens. In the bombings to start with, when you're in a cellar, thinking that you're safe from these bombs, because of this firestorm, what happened was the intensity of the heat in these cellars where people were hiding was that hot that when they went down to find the people who were supposedly hiding down there, all they saw was a liquid on the floor. The bodies had just been completely evaporated. It wasn't solid. It was just a massive a mess on the floor because of the heat.
They were cooked like you would cook something in an oven. It's exactly what happened.
That's right. Yes. But not only that, the people outside did manage to escape. Once these bombers had left, then the planes came in with the machine guns. And they were machine gunning the people who had just escaped the firestorm. It was murder, mass murder. Now, Japan's another story, because, again, I completely missed this one. I'm thinking, well, we're being told now that the Japanese soldier is a fanatic. He won't surrender. Instead, he'll commit suicide he'll keep his honor rather than surrender. This is what the story is. But then I slightly look into it, which I'd never done before, and I realised there were no prisoner of war camps. The Americans didn't have prisoner of war camps. What they did, they just shot the prisoner. When you surrender, you put your hands up, give them all rights. They shot them all. They used to send skulls back to the girlfriends back in America. So, what the Japanese obviously learned quickly, if you're fighting the Bolsheviks, a German soldier will leave one bullet, because he knows if he gets captured, he knows what's going to happen to him. So he'll save a bullet to shoot himself. If you're fighting the Apache, you're going to save a bullet, because you know if the Apache capture you've got a problem. So I'm thinking to myself, what did the Americans do for the Japanese to hold a bullet back?
Yes.
And that has never been come to light. But you can well imagine the Japanese don't hold the bullet back for no reason.
There's anecdotal evidence, and I've read it many times. For instance, when they went on to what is that small island just south of Japan, Okinawa. Onto Okinawa, the civilians, the women, and it was also in Germany, but I will get back to that. But the women actually they would murder their own children and commit suicide. Now, what can be so terrifying that a mother kills her child and then commits suicide?
Well, it's in Germany, isn't it? This is no different to the Bolsheviks. It's 100 soldiers who are going to rape you.
Exactly. In Germany, it was exactly the same. So what I'm getting to is what the Allies were doing, what the Americans were doing when they were coming into Japan, and the Russians were not the Allies, but the Russians specifically were doing when they were coming from the East, must have been so terrifying that a woman would rather kill herself and their children than to face what was coming. Now that must be terrible. It must be so terrible. It must be so evil and that if you have no other choice than doing that. And
you've got a point there, right, where the Americans are doing exactly the same as the Bolsheviks. And when the Allies, all these soldiers are surrendering in Europe, they're sending them back to the Soviet Union. Even the SS and the Germans sent them on trains back, sent people in the Balkans back. And Japan suffered, obviously, with this no actual prisoner of war camps. And then you get the Germans in camps and they're just left to starve. The common denominator of all this is who is calling the shots. And the people calling the shots is the London and the Wall Street bankers. They are calling the shots. This is why the Americans actually no different to the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks no different to the Americans.
Exactly.
They were told.
Exactly. And we're not being anti-American. I remember.
No.
Our current credo is no more brother wars, because I think we realize that we're fighting one another. Europe lost 2 generations of its best during the First and Second World War.
Yeah.
For what? They were fighting one another for what? For the bankers.
For the bankers. Yeah. Pounds started talking about it. He got assassinated.
Yes.
So this is a quick history lesson. I know, but basically this is World War II.
Yes, and you mentioned something very, very, very interesting. An American listener will maybe find this also very interesting. Henry Ford, the actual Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Company, Ford Motor Company, he was an avid supporter of Adolf Hitler. He had a picture of Adolf Hitler on his bench, on his desk. Can you tell us a little bit about that, if you know about it?
Well, it stems from the protocols. Now, some people think that this was the rules for the Jewish takeover, because every revolution, I didn't know at the time, so when I started this third documentary, I thought they were all individual. I thought the Mexican and the Spanish and the German and the Russian were all individual revolutions. No, these are revolutions for the world domination of the Jews. This is a world revolution, which is why Iraq fell, which is why Syria fell, because to get the world, you go into the Middle East after Europe. So all these wars now, they're all to secure a one world government. I didn't realise at the time, but I plainly see it now. So, now I've lost track of what I was saying. What was the question again?
We were speaking now. We were speaking of Henry Ford, Ford Motor Company, and for National Socialism. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it came from the protocols. The protocols were discovered in Russia, and they were brought back to London by, I can't remember his name now, but this guy brought them back, and he was warned that if he printed them or had them printed, he would die. He printed them, and he was dead in a year, albeit he was ill at the time, but he was dead within a year. So these protocols were the blueprint for the Jewish takeover of the world, and though the Jews always denied it, what Ford said was, what you can't deny this Bolshevik invasion of Europe. And he's been criticised by the Jews, whatever. But Henry Ford knew the situation, paid Adolf Hitler $50,000 on his birthday every year, plus the money that he invested. So, you know, he could see it, but other Americans are only. There's not many historians. I can probably think of one or two. Most historians, from Bill Cooper to Eustace Mullins, missed the boat completely with Hitler, because they thought that National Socialism was just the same as Marxist socialism. This is what they were getting told. Socialism is just as bad. Hitler's a monster. So all these soldiers are going into Europe who were actually would if they knew the truth, would have revolted themselves. But because they'd hidden from them, then they're going over into Europe, led by the Freemasons, to open up a second front. Hitler now has to split his forces. He's got a hard time as it is in the Soviet Union at the moment, but then he's got to split his forces to face the Americans. And at that point, you can more or less say that was the end of the war, so to speak. Although Germany fought to the very end. But it's Freemasonry, and it's the Bolsheviks, which together combined defeated German Christianity and Europe.
Yeah, because once again, it's just different heads of the same monster. Whether you call yourself a Bolshevik or you call yourself whatever, it's all part of a control. It's not even conspiracy. 20 years back, 10 years back, people would tell you're telling conspiracy theories now. These things are not even. It's out in the open where you can be recruited online. You can go online and be recruited into the Illuminati. There's actually I was amazed the other day because a person alerted me to this, and I was sitting there in front of this thing, and I'm in front of my own computer, and I'm thinking to myself, they are so open. You can actually be recruited now online. You can fill in an online application.
Because they have no military opposition. This is why. This is why they can come out and say, well, I mentioned the Luciferian doctrines a number of years ago, and people thought I was crazy. Okay, don't think that today. There's a lot more people understand that the Luciferian doctrines, this Gnosticism, which the Templars brought to it, it's all the way back to, the Crusades. When the Templars came over, they were preaching that God was the bad guy and the devil was the good guy. So they were always going to get burnt at the stake, especially in the Middle Ages. And that has been kept going, this Freemasonry has been kept going through Scotland, through England, through France. The French Revolution was the wise oaks who started all this. That was his main battle against the Catholic Church. The Pope was captured. He died in captivity, and the Catholic Church almost died at that point. But it rose again eventually, and then came Germany with Hitler. It was only after World War II, and I've got to say this, right, because people don't understand. The first department to deal with National Socialism was the Vatican. The last was the Vatican, because after the war was lost, Axis soldiers, what was happening in Europe, they were getting marauding. Communists were marauding, looking for National Socialists. The Vatican managed to get hundreds of thousands out of Europe down to South America. And in 1946, I discovered the last fling of the Vatican was to send millions of Deutschmarks and dollars down to South America so these people could survive. And what happened after that, it was taken over, and eventually, Pope Pius was poisoned. He was just kept on, so fooled everybody. Now, he's poisoned. Every single pope since that time was a Freemason, and Vatican II was the death. It was the death then of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is no longer. There's people in the Catholic faith, but the Vatican is actually now the Church of Lucifer. He's overrun with Freemasons, and you just listen to the Pope talk. He's turning all the doctrines upside down. That's what that war was all about. Was it Christianity or was it Judaism? I
want to speak a little bit about that because in South Africa specifically, there's many people that's very anti-Catholic, with good reason. And it's very true what you say. After Pope Pius he was poisoned, he was taken out. After that, the Vatican was basically taken over by the enemy. Never mind if we call them Freemasons or whatever, it was taken over by the other side. So the Catholic Church of today is not the Catholic Church of the 1930s in Europe. It's two vastly different things. That's a
million Catholics don't realise.
Yes.
Because it's all written.
Yes.
And the reason it's hidden is because of this genocide, what's going on today. People are looking at these immigrants going into Europe as the refugees from Syria or they come from a hard place in Africa. They're being imported into Europe to continue what World War II was all about. And if it broke out for some reason that was a holy war, 60 million dead Christians all over on the battlefields, millions of Christian women raped, and people can't see it was a holy war. And the point is, if they ever let that out, it will be more difficult for them to do what they're doing to eventually get this new world order and kill the white race.
Yes, it was a holy war. If you look at how the Waffen SS was constituted,
yes, they were not pagan.
It was per nation. Every nation contributed to the Waffen SS. People think the SS is pure German. It was never the Allgemeine SS was German. That's a fact. But the Waffen SS was a force of Europe against Bolshevism.
Yeah.
You had divisions from the whole of Europe. You
all over the world. Yes.
All over the world. You had Indians. You even had that division Ansgar, if I remember correctly, was a Muslim unit. You had everybody, literally everybody.
They declared a holy war on the Allies.
Yes. So you had the whole world fighting to a certain extent, the whole world fighting against the whole world, and we once again I think we're sitting in a situation like that where the good guys are fighting a losing battle. I think it's a losing battle. Sorry, being defeated, but at least we're fighting, and we're fighting the bad guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't do anything else but fight. Yeah.
It's all over the year. So it's very interesting. This, Karen, I'm amazed at what we hear tonight, and we can actually put out there, and people can have a listen to this. It's amazing.
Go fact check everything I've said tonight. You will find that what I'm saying is true. I mean, documentaries, if they're available in South Africa, in some countries they're not available because they won't allow it. But if you watch the documentaries, it's all sourced. It's the same as the first one.
Yes. Then Dennis, coming back to the South African situation, because this is Radio Free South Africa, so I want to also put it into South Africa. Over the last 25 years, and maybe even a little bit longer, let's say the last 35 to 40 years, we've seen power being taken away from the Christian national white government and given into the hands of a supposed black communist government, because they are communist. There's more SACP, South African Conservative Party members in Parliament today than there are opposition members. So it's supposedly a black communist government running South Africa.
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa himself comes out of the trade unions. He's an avid communist.
Yeah.
The same pattern that is happening in South Africa, it's a global trend. It's not something isolated in South Africa.
It's happening more and more. I mean, David Icke has been banned in Australia. The Jews banned him. Trump's talking about these no-eye laws. There seems to be something going on now, which is another, from the European immigration, that was a higher level of activity. There seems to be something going on now. And can I say, I even researched the occult, and I'm a Christian, but I got to a point where I had to go into the occult side of history to find out where all this started. I found out it started back mainly in the Tudor years, but Elizabeth I with the Spanish Armada. I was taught in school there was only one Spanish Armada, and that was destroyed by a storm. When I went into the research, armadas over a period of about 5 years. Every armada was sunk by the storm. So when I go into this occult world and find out things about John Dee, who was the guy in the course of Queen Elizabeth, to cut a whole long story short, you've got to see the documentary to absorb it all. But right at the end, this guy was giving a lecture, and he said that they made contact. There's another life form. There's a life form below us, the microbes, which is the whole world all on its own, which people didn't know about until microscopes became available. But he says there's another life force above us called the microbes. And information was being passed down from these microbes to the elite of Britain, and not the Jews at that time, but the Jews shortly after. And that's why they built these universities. They were getting that much information and that much technology. They couldn't handle it. So you notice at that point in time, the British Empire, this tiny little island from nowhere, started to dominate the world with the British Empire. And still do today. They never lost, by the way, the British Empire after the war. All they did, they switched the military organisations and running of them countries to financial. They put a central bank in all the countries and then controlled things through the banks, just like they are everywhere else. So, and I look into it, and this guy says, these microbes don't do anything for nothing. So John Dee said to him, well, what do you want? And they said, blood. And the lecturer said, if you notice from this time onwards, all these wars, there's a mass of dead bodies after the war. Okay? So I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on a minute. If this guy is right, I'm going to now look into if there was any sizable sacrifice at the time of the Armada. When you bear in mind, their version of the Armada is one Armada and it's sunk, and I think 100 ships were sunk, something like that, maybe more, and not one, maybe a dozen sailors at some point were killed of the British. Okay? Yeah. So a war which they never actually lost any ships, and maybe a couple of dozen killed, I then look into. And lo and behold, the Crown at the time would not allow British sailors to land. So consequently, they were at sea with disease and starvation, not allowed to land. 8,000 sailors died.
The British actually killed them.
The British would not let the soldiers, the sailors, land. So the war where they knew it was a ship, 8,000 sailors were dead. Now, that, in any understanding of a sacrifice, is a sacrifice. I'm convinced. These are occult. These are Luciferian. Blood is the lifeblood of all these elites and of the cult. So I even went down that road. And believe me, Freemasonry is the ship that holds it all together. This may sound fantastic to people listening, but I didn't just dig that figure up. 8,000 sailors died.
Yes, there's always a blood sacrifice, and we can have a separate program just around the issue of abortion, because abortion is the sacrifice of children. So these things become, when you start to realize what is actually going on, you can't sleep again. That's why I'm sitting here. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't sleep anymore, because when these things start to dawn on you, you realize you have a holy mission. We have onze heilige missie.
Yeah, that's right.
We cannot turn back, even if this causes us to perish in the struggle, but we cannot turn back. It's a holy mission.
Exactly what the Germans felt. The Germans must have been feeling the same, because they knew. They must have known.
Yes, it's a crusade, but it's a modern day crusade. It's a holy war, and it's not a holy war so much against Islam or any other religion. It's a holy war against evil itself.
Absolutely.
That is what
Absolutely, Schalk. It is good versus evil. And all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to stand by and say nothing. So we have made it our mission to say loudly and often, because, I've said this before, I do not want to go and meet my Maker, and I don't think I'm going to heaven, actually, but I don't want to turn up at the pearly gates and they say to me, but you knew about this and you did nothing. I want to be able to say I did everything I could.
Yeah, which is why I did the documentaries. And even I've been astounded by some things that I found unbelievable. And people can go check whenever you can. There was 3 armadas, and I was only taught there was 1 because they couldn't explain 3 storms.
Yes, I was also told there was 1 armada that came to fight Elizabeth I. So now I know something else I didn't know. Thank you very much, David. Karen, this was such a nice experience and illuminating experience. I think if willing, we can have Dennis again. Maybe we can have other people, other tutors also coming to pitch in. But this conversation must go on. It's not a South African thing. And this is the message that we keep repeating, and we need to keep repeating it. It's a global thing. It's not South Africa. South Africa is a little test tube, and they are testing a lot of things here. But those tests are going to spill over into the rest of the globe. We are saving the earth. We are saving the world. It's a holy struggle that we embroiled in here. So thank you very much, Dennis, for your availability. And for
it's been a pleasure. And I wish people in South Africa the very, very best. I know they're going to be in a struggle, and God be with them.
Thank you very much. Karen, maybe closing remarks from you. I see it's about 1:45. Any closing remarks from you?
Yeah, my closing remarks are thank you both very much, gentlemen. I have had a very, very long day of being on air, but we have had amazing conversations today. Skulk was part of one of them, and we have covered so much ground today. Sleeping is out of the question for the next 3 nights or so while I digest all the stuff I've learned and all the new perspectives that I've seen. But the worldwide woke people are of the same opinion that we are. South Africa is the blueprint for everywhere else. They dripped it on us, drip by drip, in South Africa, slowly, so that we became used to it before they hit us with the next thing. So what is the new normal in South Africa is absolutely abnormal in any other Western society. Being a prisoner in your own home, not letting your kids play in your own backyard, being terrified every minute of every day is not normal. But for South Africans it is, because it was brought on them very slowly. But we have seen how they are speeding it up across the rest of the world. The invasion of other races into white countries, where now I think Europe is as good as finished. The UK is done. So what's left? What's left is Australia, New Zealand, and America. And America is well on its way down that road. And if the leftists get into power with these socialist ideas of theirs, America's gone as well. Then the lights are out. The lights have gone out for the world, and us poor 6.5% of the world's population that are white can bend down and kiss our bums goodbye.
Correct. And it's not by accident. People have to understand that. You do not eliminate China by accident. This is every single white country is feeling it now.
Absolutely. And the problem is, as I see it, that if my theory is correct, that everybody, the whole Western world is just watching South Africa. The whites are collateral damage. When it hits the fan, they'll send in the guys in little blue helmets as a peacekeeping force. Well, that's well and good, but that peacekeeping force is going to meet the Chinese and the Russians, and there comes World War III. So, either way, even if I'm wrong in my opinion,
You're not wrong.
I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. I'll tell you why. Because in Haiti, they wanted to stay sovereign, and the UN went in. When the UN went in, they didn't even take ambulances. every shot was a headshot. That is a peacekeeping organization.
But there you go. But they're going to meet the Chinese because the Chinese have control of most of the riches and minerals in Africa. I've got a map available that is frightening of where the Chinese, they've got the whole of Africa. And if you think that they are going to give up the riches of South Africa just because some blue helmets have come in, I don't agree with that. So all hell is going to break loose unless we can get enough people, white people across the world, to stand up and say, it's damned enough now.
Yes. It's not going to be easy.
No, they don't want to. They're happy with their beer and TV, which is what we've been indoctrinated to do. And that is why people such as ourselves get so much hate mail. We have had some call-ins tonight, but I didn't take the numbers because they are not phone numbers. They are very weird numbers, and I knew that we don't deserve that, so I just didn't take the calls. But the thing that I'm saying is that we have been indoctrinated for decades that we are bad, that we are it's criminal to be white, that we are thieves, that we are the oppressors, that we stole everything from everybody else, and unfortunately, the younger generation believe this because it's been indoctrinated in them since preschool.
Yes.
And I don't know how we turn that around because our generation is dying off. And when we are no longer here to fight the good fight, who is going to do it? The snowflakes? I don't think so.
No.
So we have to fight with every drop of blood and breath left in our bodies, so that we leave our grandchildren a better world.
That's what you got to feel sorry for.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
your grandchildren, because they're going to get the brunt.
We are the last stand. We are literally the last stand. There's nobody beyond us.
No.
We're the last line.
Well, I hope tonight people's understood more the fact that Adolf Hitler, why he was fighting, why Germany was leading that fight. I don't think a lot of people know the whole story. Even I didn't know the whole story. It took me another 2 documentaries to get to the bottom of a lot of it. So
but
I just hope
people are aware. The same fight for nationalism. And I know it's become a really bad swear word to be a nationalist. But is our whole identity not our nation? It is where our roots. It's where we come from.
Culture.
Yes, everything is tied to our nationalism. So it should be a proud word, not a terrible swear word. And we should all be standing up and saying, I'm a South African, I'm an Australian, I'm an American, and I'm not standing for this anymore.
Yes.
No, open borders, that's the problem there.
Yeah, we can't get people to do it. So it's left to us, and we must just keep on fighting. Sorry, that was my little rant for the evening.
It was quite true, that rant.
After your 8 hours, maybe you deserved a little bit blowing off steam. So thank you very much for that, Karen.
I very seldom am opinions because that's where you get attacked and you're wrong. But I've made it very clear that is my opinion. That is what I think. I don't have a million documents to back it up, but that is my feeling on this whole subject. And one morning, we are going to wake up and we are going to ask, where did the white South Africans go? And the world is going to stand back and say, oh my Lord, how did that happen? And
exactly.
And I'm not going to be one of those who just stood by, idly by, and did nothing about it.
Yes.
Here. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, closing thoughts?
Well, on my side of things, I'm a believer. The more I've seen of this research, I'm more of a believer in God than I was before I started. And I hope and pray that some divine intervention can help us, because it's been done before. I know the story about, down in South Africa when the angels attacked the Zulus.
Yep.
These things can happen if we can just pray hard enough, and maybe, there's a chance.
Skull.
Yes, Karen, I always have believed this, that we are mere instruments I don't get the energy to sit for 48 hours sometimes without sleep by myself. Normal people can't do that. And I'm not an abnormal person. I'm just flesh and blood. So something is driving you. Something is driving Dennis. And we know it's the good. And we can just never falter. We're instruments in the hand of goodness against evil, and we must just simply keep up the good fight. We don't have a choice. It's our obligation. It is simply what we must do.
Correct. Dennis, thank you very, very much for on such short notice staying up until the early hours of the morning to be heard on our show. Thank you very, very much, and I would love to have you back because this conversation is not over.
I would love to come back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Skulk.
Thank you, Karen.
To all our listeners, same time, same place next week. God bless the USA. God bless South Africa. And God help the world we live in today. And we're playing with a song which is well known to all South Africans.